Your time is valuable. Mine, sometimes. But let's get in here. Let's figure out what's what. So we're going to talk about strategy. Now, I love strategy. Man, I love strategy. It gets me excited. It's super interesting. I read strategy books. I try to search out strategy podcasts, though those are few and far between. I love strategy. I think it's an incredibly powerful way of getting more done. And we're going to talk a whole lot about what strategy really is, how to make it actionable, how to build your own, all that good stuff. And we're going to gear all of this conversation towards talent acquisition and employer brand pros. Is it exclusively for talent acquisition and employer brand pros? No. These are ideas that should apply really, really well to, everything you're doing. Whatever you're doing, whoever you are, it should apply. So let's kind of very quickly, I got to click buttons now, don't I? Yes, I do. Bam. Hi, I'm James Ellis. Megan's got a question. Wait, hold on. Something just happened. Megan, you just did something that made my chat pop up and then it disappeared and I don't know what you did. All right, just so we know. This is exciting. So anyway, I'm James Ellis. I do employer branding. I've been doing it for more than 10 years. I am super excited to talk about this because strategy is truly the beating heart of what employer brand is all about. And as you see, as we define what strategy is, you'll see the connections. If you haven't heard me speak before, I tend to be super excited. I tend to be super pumped. This is kind of my natural cadence for how I talk about this stuff. So hang on. If you're listening to this later, do not listen to this on 1.5 speed. You will void your warranty. Anyway, employer brand needs strategy to get stuff done. Strategy is what keeps us out of the pretty pictures, pleasant words department, the platitudes team, right? That is not useful for what we're trying to do. You need a strong strategy to ladder into what talent acquisition is doing and support them so that they can achieve their goals. That's really what I'm talking about here. That's really why I'm super psyched for this stuff and super psyched that you are all here. Now, we got to do the housekeeping very quickly. Throw your questions in the chat. I'll keep an eye on it as best I can, but literally, here's me talking to camera. There's me looking at the chat. So it's a gulf. It's a wide distance, but I'll do my best to keep an eye on it. Yes, you will get the full recording, and that includes the slides. So don't worry about that. Don't worry too much about taking notes or missing anything. You'll catch it all. And finally, look, strategy is serious business. And probably the number one name in business strategy is Michael J. Porter, and the books are this big. The books are serious books. We only have an hour. So there's only so far we can get into this, but I want to make very, very positive use of this hour. So here's the problem. Strategy is fuzzy. It's vague. It's amorphous. It's cloud-like. It's soft. We're not sure. We know it's important. We know it's important because we use the word all sorts of places to make things sound important. It's not a plan. It's a strategic plan. That's not a hire. That's a strategic hire, right? Strategy makes things more powerful, more valuable, more expensive sometimes, right? Kind of. But really, and these quotes should kind of make it pretty clear that when we talk about strategy, we're not always very clear on what we mean. And here's Porter, the grandfather of business strategy I mentioned earlier. You got Henry Mintzberg, you've got Jack Welch, who only ran GE for like 15 years. Lastly, Martin's the former dean of Rotman School of Business in Toronto. There are some serious people here. And even when serious people talk about strategy, they can be a little soft. It's hard to be very clear when your essence of strategy is choosing what not to do. Okay, great, Michael. But what is it? Okay, you're telling me what it isn't, but what's going on? And strategy's hard to grasp sometimes. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think you need an MBA to really take advantage of strategy. I don't think you need to be in a boardroom to use it. I think it's for everybody. And that's really kind of the argument I'm going to try and bring forth. However, because strategy is soft and vague and fuzzy bunny and hard to understand and not quite clear, most companies, even companies who think they're doing it, are doing it poorly, right? Here's Harvard Business Review talking about how most business strategies fail because they're not even strategies. They're just plans, their ideas, their goals. Here's a great book, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. Highly recommend. A wonderful read. Richard Rumelt talks about here's all the ways most people's strategies aren't working, how they fail, how they fall apart. They don't define their challenges. They miss things. They're pretending it's just a series of goals or a big plan instead of a strategy. Fluff, buzzwords, all sorts of stuff to make it look like strategy, like strategy kabuki theater, like it's all the movements that feel like that strategy, but not an actual strategy. And if you're going to spend the time with me learning this stuff and you're going to start to take advantage of this stuff, we got to do it right. We got to do it properly. Otherwise, we don't get the value out of it. So we are asking the question, James, what the heck is a strategy? As you should be. Look, this is as close to a definition as I can come up with. A strategy is how you use what you have in the context of your situation to achieve the most. It's a lot of words. It's word salad. I get it. So real simply, it's how you use what you have to win. Now, I don't start with that one because the word win tends to get tough on us in talent acquisition employer branders, right? We're not winning anything, right? We don't win the talent. It's not a fight. It's not a battle. It's not us versus someone else and we fight and one person's left standing doing the dance and the other person's on the ground going, I need a medic, right? It's not like that. We don't win, but if we replace the word win with achieving maximum outcomes, positive outcomes, it makes sense. So strategy is really, what are you going to do and how are you going to use what you have for the maximum positive objective, right? How are you going to get the most out of it? By the way, and you'll get, when you get the slides, this is even more valuable. I've got these sections where if you really want to nerd out, and I would love it if you nerd it out, some great resources. This is a podcast between Blair Enns and Jonathan Stark, who are not strategists by trade, but are strategy aficionados, talking about various definitions of strategy and all that stuff. It's a lot of fun to listen to if you're a nerd, and that's fine because I am, and here we are. So I know that when most people talk about strategy, they immediately go to a military example. Because honestly, the word strategy is from the Greek. It means general. It's this idea that strategy and military are always kind of interlaced. They're always kind of interconnected. And I get that. But I don't want to lean too hard into that. But I do have one military example, and it's a doozy. And it's the only reason I bring it up is because it's wonderful. It's fantastic. And that is the Battle of Cannae. Now, if you watch History Channel, you know what's about to happen, and that's cool. And if you don't, you don't, and that's fantastic too. Battle of Cannae, 3rd century AD, you've got the Romans versus the Carthaginians. Now, this is a big old Roman army on their home turf. They are rested. They're ready to go. They've been well trained. They got this really cool thing where it's called a flanks pattern, where one guy holds his shield up and the guy behind him holds the shields up at an angle. So they all interlocked. So all the shields are kind of protecting them so they can kind of steamroller forward and destroy whoever's in front of them really well without losing too many people. Really smart strategy, really smart thinking, has served the Roman army very well for multiple centuries. And then over here, you've got the Carthaginians headed by some guy named Hannibal, who I think you've heard of, and not just the person of fictional situations. But he crossed the Alps, right? He's exhausted. His people are dog tired. They are toast. They are done. They are sloppy. They're not even, for the most part, all professional soldiers. It's people they picked up along the way and farmers. They're not well trained. They just kind of hand them a sword and a shield and say, you do what you're told. And they did. Now, this is a day and age in which biggest army wins. Real simple. Each soldier was effectively about as valuable as any other soldier. So you put two armies together and the biggest one's almost always going to win. Now, when you've got a gap like 86,000 to 50,000, that's a big gap. This is a fait accompli. This is a done deal. Everybody knows how this is going to end. But Hannibal, bright penny that he is, said, I didn't cross the Alps just to get crushed like a grape. Okay? What is this? I don't want this. This is not how I want things to end. So I guess we got to try something different. We got to do something different. So what he does is this. He looks to the Roman army and says, I know what the Roman army is going to do, because the Roman army is going to do what the Roman army has always done, what they've been very good at, that flanks thing. And they're going to put their strongest people up front. And the people in the back are a little less strong, but they will kind of fill in the gaps as necessary. And they're going to just steamroller past me. Got it. So what do? Well, I'm going to line my weakest people up front, which is weird. That's unusual. You're supposed to have strength meet strength and fight it out. But of course, when one strength is clearly bigger than the other, that's the worst strategy. That's the worst way of kind of getting what you want, unless what you want to do is get crushed like a grape. And then what he did is said, I'm going to put my weakest people up front, very few of them, but enough to kind of make it look like that's the whole army. And I'll put the major players, the strongest parts of my army, the cavalry, the fastest stuff, out on the flanks, out on the sides. What happens is Rome does what Rome always does. Battle starts and they start moving forward. And as soon as they start moving forward, the Carthaginians in the middle pull back. And the Carthaginians go, whoa, this was easy. We're going to be done before lunch. I'm going to have time to invent pizza. This is fantastic. And they just go, woohoo, this is going to be easy. And they charge. They move forward as fast as they can because this was way easier than even they thought. But as they moved forward and the weak part of the Carthaginian armies pulls back, the other armies encircle and envelop and flank the Romans, who remember, they're on that flanks pattern. They got the shields up like this. They're very weak from the sides and back. And it turns out as they start moving forward and continue to move forward, that flanks pattern pincers in the back, collapses them, and totally takes them out. Okay, so much for the X's and O's and the boxes and the stuff. What did all that mean? Well, remember, Hannibal, supposed to get crushed like grape, did not. In fact, it was the other way around. The Romans lost 7/8 of their people in a battle they should have walked through. They got destroyed. They got dominated. They got crushed. It's like a bad wrestling movie, right? They got toasted. They are done. And the Carthaginians lost relatively few people. Why am I telling you this? Well, I'm sorry, but Hannibal was able to defeat a much bigger army on their own home turf, simply by using his mind. And I need you to embrace this idea. This is why we're here. If Hannibal had not used his brain and says, I'm going to do what everybody else is, I'm going to do best practices, crushed like grape. Okay? Simple as that. Not even a question. It's a foregone conclusion. But by using his mind, he didn't find new resources. He didn't find new armies. He didn't invent new technologies. He simply said, well, if I move things around a little differently and change the narrative a bit and kind of pull back and flank, I have a shot here. Now, here's the thing. If he didn't win, it wouldn't have mattered because doing something different was useful. Right? Even if he lost, he had nothing to lose, right? If he did everything the way he was supposed to, he had nothing to lose. He was done. So he had every excuse to try something. And if it didn't work, it didn't matter because he was going to get crushed. But if it did, he would have achieved a kind of miracle, which is exactly what happened. Now, if you happen to work for Google or Disney or any number of massive, huge, well-resourced mega companies, you know what? Hang up now. You probably don't need any strategy. Being the biggest is its own strategy. Being the most resourced is its own strategy. But for the rest of us, and I mean everybody on this call, I'm guessing, we don't have resources. We don't have abundant resources. We can't dominate by bringing more resources, more headcount, more tools, more money, more salary offerings to everybody else. We don't have that resource to use. So we got to use our brain instead of our size and speed and strength. That's the only way we're going to get what we want to get. This is why we're here. And I know that a lot of you are thinking, but I'm already being strategic. Yeah. I just thought it through. I used my brain and I'm doing stuff. I'm going to challenge that. This is said out of love, okay? But I'm going to challenge this because I've seen your job postings and they look like everybody else's job postings. Oh, you don't believe me? Okay, so you've got a job posting as this job title and there's boilerplate language about why your company does what it does. And then there's a section called requirements. And then there's 12 to 50 bullet points with requirements. They're all written in kind of an angry, grumpy, dictatorial kind of fashion. Am I close? Of course I am. Of course I am. Because that's how all job postings look. What about your career site? You get a great career site, right? I bet it has a hero image at the top. Of course it does. I bet it's got a headline. Of course it does. I bet that headline either says careers home, which is not good for one reason, or something like we're a great company or join us, which is also not a great answer, but it's still a headline. And then you've got the search bar about how to find the jobs. And then you've got some boilerplate about how you're a wonderful company. Maybe you throw an award in there. Then you've got your, 3 to 6 values or ways of describing your culture. And I bet you have icons for each one of them, don't you? Of course you do. Of course you do. Why? Because we're all following the same model. There's best practices out in the world, and we've all said, in light of knowing what else to do, we follow best practices. That's the smart play, right? Right? Here's the problem. When everybody follows best practices, no one has an advantage. Everyone looks the same. Okay? Ultimately, when you play follow the leader, you're saying you don't want to win because you can't win a game of follow the leader. The leader is the only person who can win that game. And the leader in our case is Google and Disney, Amazon, whatever it is. And we're not them, right? So let's get real clear. Let's get super macro. There are only 2 strategies: being the best or being the only. Now, being the best is the most common thought up strategy, right? Companies say, okay, well, in order to compete for talent, in order to kind of hire the people we really want to hire, we got to be the best. It's an standard expectation. Like it's a pretty, a common thing to say. And then you realize what it takes to be the best, right? Are you going to offer Goldman Sachs level salaries? Probably not. Are you going to offer Google like perks and benefits? Right? Are you going to give everybody food 24/7 and coffee and vans with Wi-Fi that help people commute everywhere? That's expensive, right? What are you going to do to truly be the best? And so companies say, oh, we're going to be the best. That's how we're going to attract talent. Then they realize how hard that is. And they go, if we can't actually be the best, you know what's really cheap? To say we're the best and just call it a day. And that's career sites in a nutshell. That's most of your career sites. They're all predicated on this idea of let's say we're the best. Let's not back it up with any evidence. Okay, maybe we got an award that we paid for. That's where our budget went. I guess that proves that we're the best, right? 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 But of course, that's not true. And when everybody tries to do this, we're going to look the best, they all end up looking the same. Right? It's like they all apply the same kind of bold glamour filter on themselves. And they all end up looking exactly the same. And that doesn't serve. Again, these are best practices, which again are fine if you have no idea what else to do. They're kind of placeholders for good thinking. Playing follow the leader is not good thinking. On the other hand, the other major strategy is to be an only, right? Amanda likes the icons. Yeah. Every company does that. I know. So the other strategy is to be an only. And that means figuring out the thing that you can offer that you're the only one who can offer it. Now, the obvious example is a Tesla, right? I'm sorry, a SpaceX, like yet another lawn company, right? Don't get me started. But if you want to be part of the company getting people to Mars, there's only one company you can join. I mean, SpaceX effectively has a monopoly on people who want to do the kind of innovation that will get humanity to Mars. Agree with it or disagree with it all you want. That's not really what the question is here. But if this is what you want, is to get to Mars, you got a monopoly. SpaceX owns that monopoly. And I use that example and people go, oh, okay, so we need some sort of amazing highfalutin mission. Well, I'm not the CEO, so I can't control that. So I guess we got to go back to pretending to be the best. Hold on. That's just an example. There's a million ways to be different. Here's a good one. Here's one that's a lot more achievable. Let's say you are recruiting for a major, large size law firm in Dallas, Texas. Sure. And we all know lawyers are incredibly boring. Right? Their career sites are always the same. It's always 4 or 5 people. There's at least one dude. There's at least one woman. There's at least someone who's Black. There's at least someone who's Latino. There's at least, if you're lucky, you get someone who potentially is disabled. And they're all standing in front of a row of books that all seem to come from the same kind of bulk lot of printing. They all look really excited. They all look like, here, we're super excited to work here. right? It is a bit like they're in a lineup. They should hold newspapers with today's date to prove their existence, right? It's that level of just, ooh, I want to work here. Every law firm looks the same. What if you were the law firm that said, we allow dogs to come to the office? That is the dumbest thing. Oh, hold on. Yeah, it's dumb, but hold on. If we all think all lawyers are boring and dry and anal retentive and argumentative, and to some extent, that's pretty fair, and their offices are people wearing $1,000 suits and expensive, and they got the books and the libraries, and then they're all they want to show how important they are, and they're all kind of like that. And here you are, being the only company, the only law firm in Dallas who allows dogs to work here. Does that matter? Well, don't people who like dogs that are liked by dogs, aren't they warmer? Aren't they more human? Aren't they more friendly? Aren't they nicer? Don't we trust them more? Right? And if you're the kind of lawyer who says, I don't want to be in a place where my expensive suit might get dog hair on it, great. Don't work there. Work someplace else. But if you're the kind of lawyer who says, you know what, every other law firm is so freaking stuffy and boring and stiff, I want to be in a place where dogs are, you're an only. Where else are they going to go? It doesn't take much to define what makes you different, that weird monopoly that you can own. So since this is a free course, you get a commercial. I'm James Ellis. I am Employer Brand Labs. It's a one-person company. That one person is me. I am here to help companies develop their employer brand who didn't think they could afford to. And I'm talking companies about 1,000 and smaller, 1,000 employees and smaller. And because everybody thinks employer brand is expensive and takes forever, and let's be fair, the deck you get is always full of boringness and wonderful values that look like everybody else's, I don't do that. I am here to focus on good, fast, and cheap. When I say good, I mean my clients say words like inspiring. When I say fast, I mean 3 to 4 weeks. And when I say cheap, I mean less than $20,000. I mean significantly less than $20,000. So if that's something that's interesting and you'd like to learn more, check out Employer Brand Labs, look at the little QR code, do the dance with your phone. Let's talk about it. All right? Fantastic. Okay, let's get back into it. So that's enough kind of warm up. Yeah, that was the warm up. 23 minutes of warm up, right? Let's get into the steps of actually how you build the brand, which I'm sure is what you've been waiting for. So the steps are really easy, except they aren't. They look easy. They're simple ideas, but they're not. And we're going to go through each step one by one to talk about what it is and how to, where the mistakes are. And then at the end, we're going to have a couple of examples of strategies that use this model to achieve more. Okay? So remember, keep an eye on the chat. Feel free to ping me, let me know what's going on, and we will jump in. So first, you got to set your goals. Now, I am the first person who, when faced with a class that says, what we need to do is set our goals. And it's always somebody super fluffy bunny who's stating this. I'm not going to apply a gender, but it's warm and fuzzy to make goals. Don't be scared. They're goals, but you have to start. Now, I'm the first one to roll my eyes going, I don't need to do this. I get that. I understand your initial reaction. Go, oh, next slide. Come on, let's move it along. No. Honestly, properly setting your goals may be the magic bullet of strategy. Because when you don't do this, or when you set a goal that's vague or isn't specific enough, everybody else comes out of the woodwork and starts hanging ornaments on your Christmas tree, right? They start adding, oh, well, yeah. So for example, you say you don't set a strong goal. You say we should hire better. I don't know what that means exactly. And you have left it very open to interpretation. So some recruiters like, oh, that means we're going to hire fast. And HR says, oh, we're going to hire better. And your CFO says, oh, we're going to hire cheaper. Suddenly, because of all these people, because you didn't set your goal properly, you're now trying to achieve 3 goals plus however you described it to yourself. So there's 4 goals. And guess what? Can't be done. Don't do it. If you try to achieve multiple goals, you end up compromising and you don't end up with a good, strong strategy. You end up with something super weak. So setting a clear goal and getting everyone to agree on the goal at the jump is a superpower. It means there's suddenly a world of stuff you can ignore. And that's a good thing because it means you can focus your thoughts where it matters. So instead of saying, we should hire better, focus on what does better look like? What does better mean? What are you actually trying to achieve? You want to apply a number to it? Do it. You want to set do a whole, is it STAR? What is it? Specific and, that model of setting a goal? Go for it. Great. Time bound, all that good stuff. Do it. But be specific. Make it clear when you are or when you aren't achieving that goal. Making it bland, making it fuzzy, feels safe. It feels like, well, if I screw it up, if I don't achieve it, well, I can kind of hedge things and fudge things and make it look like I did it. That is going to screw you up. Don't do it. Get specific, right? Remember, you're trying to accomplish something. So what are you trying to accomplish? What matters? Now, here's the fun part. When you get super specific about your goal, it's like magically you bought yourself a bunch of allies. Because if you say, instead of, hey, we want to hire better, which no one knows what that means, if you say, we're going to lower hiring costs by 20%, guess who your best friend just became? Your CFO. By the way, they sign all the checks. It's a pretty good friend to have, okay? You want to get things done? CFOs get things done. You want to say that you want to hire the best quality people? That's your goal? Okay, you know who your friends are? Hiring managers and your COO, because that's valuable to them. Saying you're going to hire better means nothing. Getting specific generates its own allies and advocates. So don't try and achieve too much at once. And mistake number 2, I see this a lot, where people kind of reverse engineer a strategy to justify the choice they had in mind. Hey, we need to buy this tool that does X, Y, Z. So let's invent a strategy that makes it look like the only way to achieve that strategy is to buy this tool. Don't do that. You are not here to justify a solution. You're here to find a solution. And if you don't come here with good faith in that regard, just stop. Just go burn time doing something else. Play a video game. Go watch TikTok. What do I care? But set a strong goal and do it right. Okay, next step. Inventory, which sounds like Alcoholics Anonymous or Chocoholics Anonymous, if you want to be a little less sad. You got to take inventory. Now, you are likely to skip this step too because you're like, oh, I already know what I have access to. No, you don't. No, you don't. What you think you have is the stuff that's obvious. An inventory step forces you to think beyond the obvious. It forces you to say, who are my advocates? Who are my fans? What are tools that exist that I don't have direct access to that might be just kind of lying fallow in another team? They paid for it, they bought it, but then they realized, that's not what I want, and so they're not using it. Maybe you could pick that up. Maybe you have more time than other people. Maybe you have more money. Oh, that's not true. That's never true. Maybe you've got an existing brand you can kind of leverage, right? You've got a good brand footprint. Maybe you've got access to people in the network. Maybe you've got recruiters. Maybe you've got your consumer product or services, right? You sell a product and it gets delivered in a box. What do you print on the box? What do you print on that tape, right? These are opportunities that you need to be aware of. Your staff, the people who work at your company, what school did they go to? Where were their last jobs? Who are their networks? These are all parts of your inventory. And most people just go, I got an ATS, I got a LinkedIn account, and I got a social media scheduling tool. End of inventory. No. You are not done, not even by a long shot. This step reveals opportunities you didn't think you had. And literally spending 20, 30, 60 minutes just going, what do I have access to? Opens doors you didn't think you had options, right? You need to see beyond what you've always seen. Third step, what's your context? Strategies exist inside a context. The strategy that worked over there will not necessarily work over there because the context is different. Right? The strategy LeBron had to become a great basketball player, it's not a strategy I, a 52-year-old chubby white dude, can apply, right? Because the context is different. LeBron was 18, 19. He worked harder than everybody else. He was huge. He was strong. He was fast. I am not. Can't apply. The strategy that got him where he wanted to go will not get me where I want to go because it's the wrong context. So the context means understanding, one, who your competitors are. And this to me is my favorite. This understanding your competitors reveals opportunities. And you may have noticed I'm using that phrase a lot. That's what we're doing here. This is a process by which we unpackage and uncover hidden opportunities. That's why we're doing this, okay? You've got, whoops. Michael understands we've all played. We all know how basketball is. I get it. Anyway, I just like, referencing LeBron because everybody knows who he is. And I am so not. Anyway, what are your obstacles? What are things in your way? Maybe you've got a chief legal officer who's been blocking you the last 6 months and you don't know why. And you know that whatever you do has got to get past that legal officer. That's a constraint. You've got limitations. You've got, lack of resources. You only have so much time, so much money, so many man hours, and I hate that term, but here we are, to leverage. What are your limitations? What are your weaknesses? Weaknesses is really interesting because most people go, oh, it's something I got to work around. Yeah, maybe not. And as I've talked in other things, in other places, sometimes the weakness is a great kind of indicator of where a hidden opportunity is. If you've ever seen the Savannah Bananas, they're a minor league baseball team. They were a team that sucked, that no one ever wanted to see. And because they had no money, they couldn't hire good talent. So it was kind of a downward spiral. They were the cannon fodder for all the other teams. And they said, our weakness is that we suck. Okay, how do we change that? Well, they built a strategy that said, very good. They built a strategy that said, what if our goal is not to win? What if our goal is something different? What if our goal is to make the most ticket sales? Suddenly, since they were never going to win anyway, they embraced sucking. They got fun. They got goofy. They started wearing banana outfits, literally banana outfits. They started doing goofy things where 3 of them would look like they were throwing a pitch, but only 1 person had a ball. They went crazy and goofy and inventive and creative, and because of which they were really exciting to watch. Their weakness of sucking became a strength because it allowed them to do something other baseball teams would or could not. The irony is they sold so many tickets, they can afford good players. It's cool. Okay, so, and finally, if you define your context, one of the parts of that is defining the audience that matters most. You are not trying to hit multiple audiences with one arrow. You can only hit one. Who is it? Again, this is a game of focus. This is a game of saying, here's all the audiences that you get to ignore so that you can go deeper on this one core audience, right? Don't think in a vacuum. Don't presume that everybody's sitting around waiting for you to do stuff. Figure out what your context is. And for a nerd out, there's a great book called A Beautiful Constraint, whose argument is real simple but glorious, is that constraints aren't limitations. Constraints actually reveal hidden opportunities. And I love that book. I have recommended it probably more than any other book, honestly. I think it's such a mindset shift. Okay. Step 4, insight. This is where things get interesting. The previous 3 steps are kind of, I won't say rote, but they are kind of do the steps, do the work step by step. It's not incredibly creative. It's not incredibly weird. It's hey, just go figure out your context. Just go figure out your opportunities. Just go figure out the resources you have. Just go figure that stuff out, right? Here is where you start to go, what's the insight? What's the pivot that we're going to make? The insight is a magical word that, much like strategy, is overused and underdefined. So we're going to use this insight as, what is the thing that we know that allows us to do things that others can't? What is different about us? How does that difference present itself? Who likes that difference? Who cares about that difference? There's a lot of tricks I like to use to try and uncover that insight. I've got them listed here. And it's things like, what's a trope that we can twist, right? If everybody's ad says X, how do we make fun of that? How is it a thing that we disagree with? A great way to find your insight is to say, what does everybody else agree with that I disagree with? That's a great way to reveal it. What's unique to only us? In what way are we an only, right? This is how you're getting at that only kind of strategy. And where are places where everybody stops here, we take it really far? A great example is Zappos and their customer service. Everybody says they care about their customers, and they kind of don't, right? If everybody cares about my customer service, I'd have a much better relationship with my internet and cell phone provider. Simple as that. But I don't, and I suspect neither do you. There are plenty of companies who say how much they care about customer service that you go, no, you don't, and I got the receipts to prove it. But Zappos said, you know what? Customer service is cheap, relatively speaking, and it creates retention. It keeps our customers coming back. So we'll say you never, ever hang up on a customer. They can talk about and talk with you about anything they want for as long as they want. Just make them feel connected. That is taking the idea of standard customer service and taking it way farther than everybody else. And because of that, it's allowed them to thrive. Don't play safe. That's the big mistake. Everybody wants to kind of jump past this like, oh, our insight is real. No. Think it through. What is something you disagree with? What is something you don't like that other companies do? What's a trope? What's a secret only your company knows? You got to nail down your insight. By the way, there's a whole book that is effectively about insight called Strategy is Your Words. It's not a cheap book. It's a great book though. Highly recommend. So once you have your insight, how do you use that insight to your advantage? What does that insight tell you? To whom is that insight useful? How does it allow you to do things that other people can't? Remember, being an only, that strategy we're leaning towards, is based on what can you do that others can't? Can you do that others won't? And when I say the what in the what can you do, that's really vague. It could be the salaries you offer. It could be the benefits you offer. It could be the culture you offer. And if you go culture, you have to be super specific. That's another webinar to talk about, but don't just go, we have a great culture and call it a day. No, don't do that. Don't do that. You got to figure out what it is that you're offering that's different and why should people care, right? That's how this works. If you have an advantage of we allow dogs in the office, that's an interesting insight. What do you do with it? To whom is that interesting? It's not interesting to most lawyers because most lawyers are stuffy and boring and anal retentive and all the other horrible things we think about when we think about lawyers, right? And they aren't going to want that. And that's fine because we don't want to hire 1 million lawyers. We need to hire 20 lawyers. So we need to talk to the 20, or okay, let's call it the 100 who care about this. How do we talk about this insight to them so that they go, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't realize that a law firm could do that. And suddenly your strategy will start to work. Okay. You got to be willing to do it different, to take the different path. You've got to be willing to try something new. If you are not different intentionally, people can't choose you. You are the same as everybody else. They might as well be flipping a coin or picking beans out of a bag or something, right? They're not choosing you because of your advantage, your difference, your strategy. They're just choosing you because they need a job. Guess what? The second they get a better paying job, they're gone. And finally, we take all that information, we build our strategy, and we answer the question, how do we take that advantage and win with it? That's all strategy is. Now, I'm being a little vague here because there's no right way to write or define, or there's no Mad Libs for strategy, right? There's no kind of like fill in the blanks thing. If there was, we'd all have been doing it already, okay? There isn't. But sit down, get yourself a glass of coffee or water or something and just kind of sit in a quiet place and go, what is our insight? What does that insight allow us to do? How do we take advantage of that idea to win? Me, I'm a whiteboard guy. I'll put my headphones in. I'll crank some music to kind of keep my brain moving, and I will just start writing. And eventually, and not when I say eventually, I don't mean days later. I usually mean within 15 or 20 minutes, something begins to appear. It's not always exactly right, but enough to keep me kind of pulling at that thread, to keep figuring out what else can we do with this. The biggest mistake people make here is to say, I made a strategy, and they think they're done. They got to test it. You've got to turn to someone who hasn't heard this and say, this is my strategy. And they either go, well, aren't we doing that already? Or I don't understand what to do. Or how do we do that? Or like if they get confused, you got to go back to your drawing board, or in my case, the whiteboard. You've got to get specific. A strategy that people don't know how to take and run with is not a strategy. Here's an example. Southwest Airlines, we all know what it is. Actually, you know what? That's not true. We've got a lot of international people who might not know. Southwest Air is effectively the first major carrier to go cheap, right? Before Ryanair, before Spirit, before Frontier, Southwest was the king of low-cost airfare. And the reason they were able to do what they were able to do, which was kind of amazing, was that they said, every other airline, Delta, American, United, British Airways, whatever, all the airlines, they all did the same thing. They all said the best customer is the business customer because they have the most money. And the way you attract a business customer is to have special extra nice seats and a business lounge, and all these kind of things for business travelers. And Southwest said, well, if everybody's doing that, what can we do different? And the answer was ignore business travelers. Now, of course, you might say, don't do that. That's where the money is. Except you had dozens of companies fighting over that pool of money and no one fighting for the other pools of money. And Southwest said, well, rather than be one of 100 companies trying to get at the big pool, we're going to be the owner of these other pools. And it made them so much money. And what they said was, everything is about low cost. That means you fly different air routes that are cheaper. We go to cities that most people don't. We have standardized planes, so the repairs are cheaper, the parts are cheaper. We don't assign seats, so we don't need complicated software. We don't offer a lot of meals, so we don't have to worry about that. Anything that makes us the cheap choice is the right thing. Now, that strategy is great, except it's a real strategy, which means you could hand it to anybody at Southwest and say, when you see this strategy of we are the low-cost airlines and we do not cater to business travelers, we cater to everybody else, everyone who sees that strategy understands what that strategy means in their job. It means, okay, we don't offer salads. Great, we have to change our menu. Okay, great, we have to change our software. Okay, great, we have to change how we're doing repair systems and everybody saw that strategy and went, I get it. I know what my job is to support that strategy. That is the sign of an excellent strategy. If you want to nerd out, 33 Strategies of War is kind of a classic, but I will also recommend, and if you're on Spotify Premium, it's free as an audiobook, No Bullshit Strategy. Wonderful book. Wonderful book. It's relatively new. Highly recommend. Okay. Ariel loves that I name-checked Blue Ocean. Nice. Okay. The last step is the most important. No, really. You got to test it. Strategy is so abstract. It's easy to say, I wrote a strategy and call it a day. You're not done. It's not done until you test it to make sure. It's the only way to ensure that you've got something useful. Now, here are some ways to test. First, ask yourself, is this a strategy that another company could put into place? And if it is, red flag. If it's a strategy that anybody can do, you're in trouble because that strategy might be, we're going to be the best. We're going to be the biggest. That's not a strategy. That's a goal. That's a hope. Your strategy has to be something that pretty much only you could do. Can you describe it as it's this, but better? Not a strategy. Then you're just saying we're like that, but we're going to be better than that. What does that even mean? How do you get that? How does everyone in the company go, oh, I understand how to make that happen? That's a great way to say that your strategy is not actually a strategy. Flip it around. If you say our strategy is to be the best customer service, okay, is the reverse a strategy? Can you win with the worst customer service? No? Then it's not a strategy. Then it's just a trait. It's a nice direction. It's a best practice, but with a different name. It's not going to serve you. If someone reads it and says, I never thought of it like that, that is a great sign. That feels like you're revealing a secret, a surprising truth about the situation that everyone goes, oh, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way. Suddenly they know what to do. Maybe you'll have some fine tuning to make the strategy less of just an insight, but that's a great sign that you're doing some great work. And finally, as I said before, is it clear what people need to do? So many books and so many stories talk about companies revealing their brand new strategy for 20 whatever, and they say, here's our strategy. And someone goes, I don't understand what I'm supposed to do with that. That's really common. actually the part where they raise their hand and say that, that's less common. But that's the truth. Most people say, okay, that's a great strategy, company. What's my part in that? What am I supposed to do with that? And that's a sign of a bad strategy. Okay. Yeah, the worst mistake, don't test. You got to test. So let's do some examples. Let's start with Hannibal, since we already told that story, right? It's about, what is our purpose? Our goal is to defeat a larger army on their turf. What are our resources? We got this many people. We've got this kind of army. We know what they're going to do. They have a standard approach to things. We could be creative. What's our context? Well, they're overconfident. We're a long way from home. And in fact, that's an advantage because we know that if we don't win, we're never going home. That's a pretty strong motivator, right? The insight is the Romans' success with the flanks made them overconfident. They don't realize how incredibly weak they are from behind on the sides. That's an interesting insight. How do I use that to my advantage? Well, I'm going to do something out of the ordinary to attack them from behind and from the side. What's the strategy? Draw them forward, flank them with my best people, and attack from the rear. Test it. Well, okay, 1, no one expects it. 2, the opposite of the strategy would be to meet force with force, which is a valid strategy, but a bad one. This is a strong strategy. This is how it works. So let's do a little talent acquisition examples. Here is a real world example. You need to increase your recruiting brand awareness. This was something I did when I was at Groupon. Groupon was a well-known company in Chicago and in pockets of places, but as an employer, not very well-known otherwise. My goal was to increase the brand awareness, specifically around how our company is a place where people have room to do good work. Okay. What was the, whoops, I got to move my slides so I can see what I'm doing. Okay. What was the inventory? Well, we've got lots of staff. And they all have really interesting personalities. We were kind of this company that loved to be friendly and interesting and quirky, and everybody had a really cool personality. They all had weird hobbies and things we could leverage. We also had a global staff. We were on 4 continents, but most of these people felt isolated, like they were, like the Australian team especially, the Australian New Zealand team felt like they might as well have been on the moon for as much as they thought we cared about them. We also had technical support issues. We had freedom to do whatever we wanted. No one was going to tell us what to do because no one cared what we did. We knew everybody had an iPhone. I had some web skills, and I had a specialist on my team who was a former recruiter who hired a bunch of people and was still friends with those people, meaning she had an amazing network within the company. Hey, AJ, how you doing? Okay, that's my resources. What's the context? Well, I'm in Workday. Our career site is boring, and it was homemade. So our IT team made it to save money, but then of course now they're busy and they never want to change it. Everything we need to do has to be global. We're not going to just focus on one organization. We had no budget. I mean, literally the first year I spent less than $400, and that was because I bugged my boss for her credit card. People have started to ignore the brand they used to know. Comms has to review things, but legal doesn't have to care about it. And we have global connections to the staff. That is a strong context. What's our insight? We've always asked our people to be themselves. So we collect a lot of weirdos and people who are super unconventional. That's interesting, right? People who are interesting, right? People who are strange and quirky, you're attracted. You want to see what they're going to say. You see what they're going to do. It's really useful. All we have to do is amplify that. How do I use this to my advantage? Well, we're going to let people show themselves off. We're going to give them a way to advocate for Groupon and themselves. So we weren't going to say this about Groupon and go off and be a parrot. We're going to say, you're weird. Talk about your weirdness. Talk about who you are and what you like and what you care about. And you lead them into how that is why they're at Groupon. Super useful. Okay. What's the strategy? Let people write their own profiles. We built, Google Forms, and we used all these cheap, and frankly, mostly free tools to make it easy for everybody to kind of write their own profile. And we selected the best one and we put it out there. We knew that when we did a profile of them, they'd share it, right? They'd put it on their social media. They talk about, hey, look, my company did a profile of me, and it would start to generate awareness. We would also put it on websites on a separate domain, so we didn't have to worry with legal and IT and stuff. We knew it was separate, but we could brand it. We could do what we wanted. We can kind of push the envelope. We tested it. It isn't website, but better. The reverse is tell leadership stories or tell candidate stories, which is a strategy, but not the one we wanted. And we definitely got a lot of, I never thought of that in response. All signs of a good strategy. Next example. Oops, got to click on the right thing. Boom. We need to get our hiring managers on board. And this is one I think I wanted to see more often. Frankly, I'm surprised I don't. Hiring managers are super useful, and they're a limited resource. They're a resource you very rarely tap into, right? For recruiting, it's okay, there's the intake meeting, and then after that, you're just shooting candidates over the fence, hoping for the best. And if that's not your world, good for you. That's fantastic. But for a lot of people, that's exactly their world. So how do we get hiring managers super engaged in this? Well, our goal is get hiring managers to be engaged with the recruiting process. Crystal clear goal. What's our resources? We got recruiters, obviously. We got these open roles. We got a basic tech stack. We've got hiring managers. We got a career site. We got LinkedIn. Pretty standard. Nothing was really kind of like super creative. What we thought of was, this is not even a most creative strategy. It's just connecting dots in a way that the company hadn't done before. The context was hiring managers seem to be complaining that their needs aren't being taken seriously. You see that as a problem. I see that as a way, as a lever to get them to listen to us. We can solve this problem. Oh, good. I have that problem. I want to listen. Great. Now you're in. All their roles were flowing through a standard process that didn't result in stronger applications. Recruiting had built a process that was about efficiency and not about results. Pretty common in a lot of companies, and hiring managers were felt very separate from the process. And because of that, they started to answer phone calls from, agencies. What's the insight? People like feeling seen. Hiring managers have egos. No, not radical, but they do. And so what we could do is potentially help them feel special and that their roles are special. And when they felt that, they would play with us more, right? So the advantage was, if I can make the hiring manager look special, not only am I going to call them down, I can tap their audience, their networks of experts, and that might be able to expand the pipeline. And then the strategy was show them off via homemade iPhone videos. They were 30 to 60 second videos talking about something interesting that happened at work or how the team is different. I will say, as an asterisk, this is not a brand new strategy, and a lot of companies do it. I will say that most people embrace the wrong part. They think, video is the strategy. No. Video is the channel by which you execute the strategy. The strategy was, we're showing off the hiring managers. That's what this was all about. And video was just the way we did it. 2, ask them to share the videos knowing that you're going to help promote them. Like, you're going to get every recruiter to like and share. You're going to get other people to like and share, to really promote them out. And this is all free. And then finally, when you saw success, tell other hiring managers about it. And they would go, oh, wow, I want to do that too. And suddenly it becomes a flywheel, and you're generating a lot of hiring manager engagement. The test, is this just what we do but better? No. And this is the opposite of telling a corporate story. Got it. Last example. I'm excited. My voice is starting to fry up a little bit. You want budget. Yes, a strategy to help you get budget. You're welcome. So we wanted to get funding for a new job posting copywriting initiative. This is just an example. Your mileage will vary. So what was what we need to do? We had bad job postings, HRBPs. No one wanted to write them. When they did write them, they sucked at it. Okay. Sorry, alert. Everything took 6 months to change. People had limited access to social, but there were some attractive photos, but meh. The context was, it's a mediocre career site, limited access to social, and everyone assumes that recruiting did all this work, but recruiting didn't want to do it. They are busy sourcing. They're busy doing all the other parts of it. The insight was, the business didn't see an issue because they just assumed someone else was supposed to do it. Sound familiar, folks? Yeah. So if that's the insight, the advantage is I have a perspective. I know that our job postings aren't just bad, they lag behind others. I mean, like, way behind. I'm suddenly applying a strategy of show the pain to people who have resources. And without any other outlet for telling our story, we look and sound like everybody else, and we don't solve this problem. So the strategy was, pick a hiring manager, one hiring manager who might help, show them a job posting from other companies, kind of give them a compare and contrast and say, this is why we're getting creamed. They look like this, we look like that. Start to ask them to identify other hiring managers who can join in on a pitch to invest in better job postings. Suddenly, it's not a recruiting wants this, the business wants this because it solves business problems. You had evidence that you could put together, and then suddenly you have an army of hiring managers who would each commit maybe $1,000 to kind of get that value. And honestly, if that money being pooled wasn't enough, you could also say, hey, look, I have some money committed from the business. Can you match it, or can you, fill the gap to kind of make this happen? Suddenly the strategy is they see you as someone solving business problems instead of solving your problem. And suddenly it works. And the test is real simple. You're going to do it yourself. So do me a favor. I know we're just about at time. Throw in the chat if there's something you learned, if it was useful, if this is helping you see new opportunities. I would love to hear from you. I would love to know what was useful, what was valuable, how this expanded your thinking a little bit, anything like that. Just throw it in the chat real quick. In the meantime, there's the commercial. I got to commercialize it. I'm going to drink while you're typing. And I will say, if this is interesting stuff and you want more resources, I have 4 books. I put all my resources on employerbrand.ing, employer branding. Right. This is where you're going to see all my articles and podcasts and videos. I'm here to help you get value out of employer brand, to see the power of it. That's where I put it all so that you can get it. Most of those resources are free, not all of them, but most of them. So there you go. All right. Wow. Okay. Wow. Some great comments. Thank you so much, Madison, Amanda, Sarah. Super useful. Alex, thanks so much. So we're going to close. That's really all I had. Thanks so much for being here. I will send out the recording probably in a couple of hours. I got 2 meetings to go to, and I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you joining in and paying attention and hanging out with me. And I hope this makes strategy more achievable, more actionable for you, regardless of your team, regardless of your role, regardless of your function. So thanks so much for being here, and we'll talk soon.